Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Joe Sammy here. We have Joey Razul from Razul Racing. We have Ben Schneider from Ben Schneider on YouTube and LastCar.info. And Jackson Lambros from Outlap Media. Everyone's all here for Formula One, MotoGP, and World Rally Championship. And a big thank you to our Patreon subscribers calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, the newest member of the Grid Network Patreon investors. Invest in the Grid Network. 2024 is going to be a big year for us. Be part of it. Get some nice Grid Network stickers as well, too. And if you want to do a one-time investment or buy a cup of coffee or a YouTube super chat to anyone of the Grid Network team members, you could do that through the super chat or buy me a coffee, and they'll thank you on the air. Gentlemen, we saw a thrilling Las Vegas Grand Prix. Many already calling it the race of the year. There's only one more race, so it's going to be pretty easy to determine if it is the race of the year or not. We saw plenty of actions throughout the field, from the back to the front. Max Verstappen won. A lot of people are going to see that headline and think, okay, Max Verstappen won. But he really had to go out there and fight for this win. We saw a lot of passes, including passes without the DRS. We saw people re-overtake if they got passed. And just in general, it wasn't just only passes on pit road. It was just seemed to be everywhere throughout this track, including areas we didn't think passing was possible, the slower corners. So Jackson, starting with you, were you surprised by how the race played out and the amount of passes we saw?
I think when you get this combination, Joe, of long straightaways, little to no grip, and just overall a new track, and it feels like a very balanced playing field, at least for the drivers, it almost kind of felt like it was something that was, I don't want to say destined to happen, because you look at what was happening Thursday and we thought, okay, this is going to be a train wreck. But yeah, I mean, I was absolutely surprised with the final product, and we absolutely cannot forget the train wreck that happened Thursday night, but I think it absolutely made itself up and was, in my opinion, one of the best showings of the year. Joey, what do you think?
Well, so we have two kind of situations here, because at one kind of side of this, you could see passes coming from a mile away. And I mean literally a mile away, because they were coming all the way down that strip straight. And you knew that DRS was going to be super powerful down there. So you knew that was going to create passing. What I was so surprised to see was how many opportunities for passing were getting set up. How many times we saw cars, 2, 3, 4 cars going down that straight together. We saw a couple of incidences where there were 2 or 3 cars wide, long into the race. This wasn't just, after a restart or something where everybody's bunched up. The pack stayed relatively together. And to your point as well, not just DRS passes. We saw passes into the inside of turn 1, the outside of turn 1, Hamilton and Alonso particularly, just showing their racecraft. So, yeah, if we were worried that this was going to be a parade, everyone was calling it, the new crown jewel, or supposed to be the new crown jewel, similar to Monaco. This is nothing like Monaco. So yeah, I'm very excited. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, well, to Jackson's point, I don't think we can forget what happened on Thursday, and I'm sure we'll get into that here a little bit later in terms of just how we're going to remember the entire weekend. But I was very surprised. I was, not really sure what to expect. I knew there were a lot of variables coming into this race, and this is a circuit that obviously, nobody's ever seen before. We've never had a race here before. We didn't have any support races to kind of tease us and give us an idea of what we were going to see. And I think it absolutely delivered, to have a legitimate three-way battle for the win. I'm sure for everybody who's not a Max Verstappen fan, it was definitely a buzzkill that the same guy ended up winning the race anyway. But how we got there, the journey to get to another Max Verstappen win, was certainly a lot different than it's been the vast majority of the races he's won throughout this year. And so I think, to Jackson's point, absolutely the best race of the season. I saw some people saying it was the best race in the last few seasons. I don't know if we can go that far, because we certainly got some great races in 2021, to say the least. But as of this calendar year, I think absolutely most fans would share the opinion that the quality of the racing we saw, it wasn't just a complete runaway for Red Bull. Max Verstappen really had to go out there and earn this one, and more power to him.
And I would kind of argue really quickly that if we're looking at the new aerodynamic era, 2022 onwards, I don't think anything has produced better racing than this street track today. And I was talking to Joe in the group chat last night. I found our solution to make these cars race really well. Just make it either cold as crap or just give us zero track grip, and just the racing will naturally be good.
You know, we've seen the DRS like really become a strategy thing, especially the detection points. That's one of the things that does stand out for me from last year of great racing. We saw Leclerc and Verstappen going at it early on in the season with that back-to-back fight, and we kind of got this a little bit this year. Unfortunately, Checo's been on the receiving end both times when it comes to this DRS strategy. You know, we're talking about last time out in Sao Paulo with Alonso, and now with Leclerc, you saw him biding his time. You knew he was only going to get one shot at it, because you saw that once he gets past with the DRS, that's no longer the faster car of the two. The DRS gives you that much advantage. So it really became a strategy game. And I think that's the only other thing in this era that we saw Leclerc play this game back with Verstappen at the beginning of last year.
Yeah, Joey, I want to respond to that, and we'll get off of this bird walk, but it's very much shades of, say, Saudi Arabia, first time we ran it in 21, where they realized just how powerful that DRS was, and you're sitting on that detection point and trying to, get as much of an advantage. And FIA, Saudi Arabia realized that, cut it short. So I think that's something we could totally see change in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Joe, get us out of here.
But no, Jackson, just real quick, one more, and then I promise we can move on. But to your point about the colder temperatures, everybody talks about how we need a race in Africa. It's the last continent we don't have. There's one more continent, the Antarctica Grand Prix.
Antarctica Grand Prix. Get those wet tires some use.
Yeah. Red Bull does this thing where they like drive their F1 cars everywhere. So, I mean, if you want to talk about instant advantage,
but Verstappen would win that one because he's the one who did the demonstration when they put the chain.
Exactly.
So. He's got the experience.
Yeah.
And one of the things we've always heard the discussion about the tire warmers. When are they going to ban them? This might make a case of, hey, if the tires are colder, the grip level when you come out pit road, we know Juan Pablo Montoya looked really good on cold tires after pit stops. That could be really something maybe get a lot of folks thinking about. A couple of comments in the chat room from Adam. That was a really good race. Fully enjoyed it. And Max Verstappen got a 5-second penalty. And that's the thing. It wasn't just a cakewalk for Max Verstappen. He had to go out there, fight, get this win. We saw several passes for the lead when we saw Leclerc get around him. Max went into pit road. Then we saw Sergio Perez get around Charles Leclerc. Leclerc gets back around Perez. This allows Verstappen to get around his teammate. Then Leclerc, and then sort of pull away. But the big thing we saw, Leclerc, he stood there still fighting Sergio Perez for second place. Looked like he lost it when he went wide the second from last lap, but just caught up with 4 corners left, turn 14, got around Sergio Perez and just held him off for second place. Joey, Leclerc said he was disappointed to finish second, but was this his best performance of the year?
This is one of the most heartening things as a Ferrari fan is when Leclerc finishes second, 2 seconds off the lead and is disappointed. Like from a year of such Red Bull dominance to hear him, really feel like this could have been the opportunity for the win. Like that says great things for the program going into Abu Dhabi and going into 2024. He qualified, 4/10 ahead of Verstappen, and he passed Verstappen on merit. Yeah, I know we mentioned that Verstappen had that 5-second penalty, but before he came in for the pit, he was passed legitimately on track. What feels like for the first time since 2021. Honestly, it feels like it's been so long since that's happened. I know it's been shorter than that, but yeah, man, it's a big boost for Ferrari, I think.
Joey, that's an excellent point, because I remember tweets from the last couple of years where Leclerc was saying, we're really happy with a 4th place result today. And for a Ferrari driver to be saying you're happy with a result where you don't even get on the podium, I think speaks volumes of where that team has been the last couple of years, really not even being close to competitive enough to take the fight to Mercedes or take the fight to Red Bull when, either one of those teams pick your season where they've been so dominant. So the fact that Leclerc finishes second and says, we're disappointed. We feel like we could have had the win today. obviously it's too late this season, but I think, we go into this offseason here. It'd be great for the entire sport, honestly, to have Ferrari up there, to have Mercedes back up there. Maybe you can even get McLaren in on the action here, and we can actually have some parity and some fighting for these wins next season and have more races like this. I think that's going to be great for everybody involved in Formula One. So to answer the question, I think absolutely, without a doubt, Leclerc's best performance of the year so far.
The question we got to ask ourselves, gentlemen, is how different would the narrative of this race have been if Leclerc didn't lock up and give up that position to Checo? Because yes, I get the argument, Joey, that maybe that gap could have been closed, but the track's starting to rubber in. We know how fast those Red Bulls are in clean air. And as much as it sucks for me to say this, and as much as Ben wants me to say this, I think no matter what, it was going to be very, very much in Verstappen's favor. So instead of getting a boring finish where we just watch that gap grow a little bit longer and longer, we watch Charles let it hang in turn 16 and just absolutely chuck it from way, way further than he should have on Checo for what I felt like was the move of the year.
And honestly, if we're asking ourselves that question, then we've got to do the other side of it and say, what if Ferrari had the 1-2 to fight with, and had Sainz up there and had a kind of a fair battle, not this 2v1 situation?
I genuinely hope that Ferrari and that whole team looks at that, because yes, it is a replacement battery, but I can't think of another kind of scenario where something as bizarre as that has caused a grid place penalty. The first thing that instantly stands out to me was Sepang 2017, Grosjean hits a drain cover. I don't remember if he got a grid penalty for that, but no, just
was it
totally
early
unfair.
enough in the season the allocation wasn't an issue? Because
it was second flyaway season.
Yeah.
I want to say it was right before the Americas, so
because the one I keep looking back to is Baku 2019 when the Williams hit the drain cover. We've had a lot of cars hit drain covers.
Yeah.
And there was no grid penalty for that because, they were this was, fourth or fifth race of the season at the time. They had plenty of allocation left.
Well, and that was your point yesterday, Joey, about the penalty wasn't for hitting the drain cover. It was because you hit the drain cover, you went over the allocated number of parts, and that led you to get the penalty, as it always would in that circumstance. My counter argument to that would be the reason you went over was because of something entirely out of your control, and maybe they should consider a special circumstance for that. Obviously, they didn't. And to your point as well, if they had, would have been very interesting if it had been a 2v2 Red Bull versus Ferrari battle and how that would have played out. So unfortunately, I feel like we were kind of robbed.
Could have been, yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm going to be really disappointed if Max or Checo wins next week and they go 21 for 22, because that one Singapore race that Ferrari won.
Dude, we'll take Checo at the
special. Like, if you're going to dominate this much, if you're going to
say a Checo win,
we'll take anyone that is not Max. We will do anything to not hear the Dutch national anthem one more time.
This was always so interesting because when Hamilton was so dominant, he would always kind of back off on the last, 3 or 4 races of the season. Once he clinched the title, he would say he wouldn't, and he was still racing 100%, but the results didn't show that. And that's always when Verstappen came in, got his wins. It would sneak in there. Now that Verstappen is the one that's dominant, I don't think that he has that in him to back off the way that Hamilton did.
So here's the real question we got to ask ourselves. How much of that is Helmut Marko or Christian Horner realizing we've got an insanely fast car? Let's try and sweep this thing, right?
Yeah. But that actually just throws more into sharp relief how well Ferrari did
absolutely
this weekend, because it's not that Verstappen's backing off at the end of the year when there's literally no more things for him to win. He's just having to pay for his renewal of his license at this point. So that is, I'm already on the Ferrari hype train for next year is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and Lewis in 2015, I think back to when Nico Rosberg came back and won the championship the next year. That stretch started, he won 7 straight races. That started with the final 3 races in 2015 after Lewis won the championship at Coda. And then Nico.
And then the momentum went Nico's way,
Yeah.
Max Verstappen, that's just in him. He's a racer. From all the comments we've heard, earlier, and then after he won the race, oh, I'm looking forward. I had fun. Well, that's definitely a big change in tune, but Max Verstappen going out there, I think he's trying to get this win because he knows he could set the record for the highest grid ranking champion ever. But one of the things we got to talk about too is the F1 point standings, and Sergio Perez has clinched second place away from Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton's race was essentially undone by contact with Oscar Piastri. Quite ironic to think about how it was Toto Wolff that was one of the people that opposed the idea of no penalty for Carlos Sainz. How the race would have worked differently too, because then you wouldn't have essentially Lewis Hamilton in 11th, but that big crash where we saw in the beginning that could have changed everything. Mercedes, their pace was just nowhere. I mean, we saw the Alpines were ahead of them. Esteban Ocon. Lance Stroll finished ahead of both Mercedes. Lance Stroll in that Aston Martin. And now Mercedes, one race remaining. The last time they went an entire season without a win, 2011. Wow. Ben, starting with you. How disappointing was Vegas for Mercedes to finish 7th and 8th? And do you think they're going to be winless?
Yeah, that's wild, Joe, to think about. Because even before their dominance started, Nico Rosberg got the Chinese Grand Prix win in 2012. That was Mercedes' first win since they re-entered the sport. And then I know Lewis got one for sure in 2013 because he had one every season up until last year. I forget off the top of my head if I assume Rosberg maybe had one or two. Obviously, Vettel had the last 9 in a row in 2013 and had that record until just this year as well. But for Mercedes, it's a very unfamiliar territory for them here these last couple of years to go from an era where you were so dominant and winning every driver's champion or almost every driver's championship up until the last one in 2021, and then every constructor's championship to go with it. Now the regulations change again, and it's a slightly different story for this team here. To only finish 7th and 8th, again, I know George Russell would have been a little bit further up there if he hadn't had his penalty and the issue, the contact with Verstappen there in the middle of the race. But, it certainly has to be a disappointment for a team that didn't know any different other than just, what Red Bull's experiencing now. But at the same time, I think that especially with how their run of dominance ended at Abu Dhabi in 2021, you've got to think that, there's still a fire lit underneath that team and underneath Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton to come back and try to continue to fight for this 8th World Championship. And so we'll see if they can, like Ferrari, close the gap to Red Bull heading into next year.
Ben, totally unconnected to the way Mercedes has dominated the past half a decade. I honestly do not really feel that bad for them. And I say that because Toto's admitted they've made a tractor. The majority of this season has been a throwaway for them. And while it would have been great to see them succeed, I'm not gonna lose too much thought about it. If there's a team who I am absolutely disappointed in right now, it's a team who has managed to recover massively since the start of the season at Bahrain. A driver who I was running around at Velocity this weekend trying to figure out, hey, you've been in podiums now. How can we maybe turn that into wins this weekend when anything can apparently happen at Vegas? I so thought that this could be McLaren's weekend to do something incredibly special. And both of those Mercedes-powered cars out of Q1, Lando has this almost IndyCar-style crash, a very, very scary crash. Not actually because of a puncture, but because of a bump. And things were looking so good for Oscar Piastri until just unfortunate set of circumstances for him to get him out of the points. Was running up in 3rd, but obviously had to get that change. And yeah, Joey, for me, it's just biggest loser has to be Papaya, guys.
Yeah, I mean, Oscar Piastri did make his way back to the points. He got fastest lap and he got 10th. So a little bit, but man, yeah, he was running up near the top. And going back to Mercedes for a little bit, it's ironic that their win last year, their big win, which was Russell's win in Sao Paulo, is the reason that they stuck with this design of car for this year. And it's the reason they still have a tractor after it was, very evident last year. So again, it's kind of hard to feel bad for them because they had one turn of fortune at a track that often seems to have turn of fortunes for people. And they said, yeah, that's enough to commit for 23, 22 races. That's enough to commit our future to this idea when nobody else is doing this. So yeah, I don't know how short of a memory they have there, but it must hurt, because if they do have that kind of short memory, it must feel like they've never won ever in the history of forever.
Well, yeah, I mean, to that point, I'd have to say it is incredibly rich coming from Toto Wolff, talking about how bad it is for the sport to have one guy dominating everything and winning all the races all the time, as if that's not what they did for almost 8 consecutive years. I understand it. They never, Lewis never won 16 of 17 in a row or anything like that. It was never this dominant by one guy, but just the spirit of, the championship at the very least being a formality and being predictable. And I guess if I do the math right in my head, Lewis won 6 championships in 7 years from 2014 to 2020. So to now turn around and kind of have that attitude when another team's dominating, I do see your point. It is kind of hard to feel bad for them in that regard.
Yeah, and just to real quick add on to that, you cannot complain about going winless when you have a driver like Fernando Alonso, who hasn't won in over a decade, and is still up here fighting every chance he gets. So, real hard to feel sorry for him.
Well, Joe, we're about to talk a lot more about Fernando Alonso here.
Yeah, there you go.
I was going to say that's just perfect, because Fernando Alonso, as you can see in the standings, he is tied with Carlos Sainz for 4th place in the driver's standings. And look at Lando Norris, only 5 points behind, and Leclerc 12 points behind. So if Leclerc was to get another 2nd place finish, and if no points scored by Fernando Alonso, Lando Norris, he could potentially steal this 4th place. We know, as you mentioned, Jackson, Lando Norris, rough weekend at Vegas. Fernando Alonso, well, the race went out pretty much lap 1 spin, recovery, but still got there. And then Carlos Sainz, free practice 1, just sent him back for the entire race weekend. So Jackson, got to ask you, which driver do you believe has the best chance to take 4th in the point standings next weekend?
We're all like leaning in to read.
Sainz, Ferrari are fast again. Aston are tractors. Joey.
You know what? That I would be really tempted to agree with that, but the thing is that I do think it's Carlos Sainz that has the best chance of winning. We have 1 race though, and these 4 drivers, really 3. I don't think Leclerc is in that fight. So the 3 drivers, Sainz, Norris, and Alonso, who are competing for that 4th place, they have had the craziest luck throughout this season. This race that we just watched started with the Spanish spin, Alonso and Sainz spinning out in turn 1, and completely changed the trajectory of their race. And when the points are so tight between the 2 of them, any of that happening in Abu Dhabi, and Norris going out of this race too, this battle might not even be a question if Norris doesn't crash on lap 5 in Las Vegas. So with those huge unknowns going into Abu Dhabi, and these 3 always seeming to be, somewhere near the center of this, it's going to be really tough to pick a true 4th place. I'm leaning towards Sainz though.
I'm leaning towards Norris simply because I don't trust Ferrari in situations like this, historically speaking. But I think mathematically speaking, it is Carlos Sainz who's in the best situation. Fernando Alonso, as impressive as his start to the year was, and even picking up a podium here late in the year as well. I don't know that the Aston is that competitive anymore to the point where it's going to be able to hold on here. I guess it's hanging on by a thread. They're tied now. Sainz obviously has P4 on countback because of his win in Singapore. Alonso doesn't have a win this year, and that's the tiebreaker. But I don't believe they're going to be tied following Abu Dhabi. I think it's very unlikely that Leclerc swoops in there with a podium and everybody in front of him in this battle doesn't score points or has a retirement or something. I think it's not unheard of, obviously, but what did we just see with Lando Norris? One of them might have a problem, but I struggle to see all 3 doing that. So I think Leclerc does mathematically still have a shot at 4th, but I think it's really going to come down to those 3 drivers. I'm going to lean towards Lando Norris, but I think Carlos Sainz certainly is in the best position going into Abu Dhabi as well.
sorry, Ben, I didn't mean to interrupt, but all 4 of those drivers this year have battled for the win legitimately with Max, and all 4 of those drivers have finished outside the points through no fault of their own from just being slow throughout a race.
No,
so
huge roller coasters for all of those guys.
Yes, exactly. It's been such a huge roller coaster for the 4 of them. So Abu Dhabi could be any of those.
Abu Dhabi is going to be very exciting. And of course, everybody's going to probably be following the Constructors' Championship too. At least the battle for second place with Mercedes and Ferrari closing in. Ferrari, they seem to have the momentum, so it seems to be getting closer and closer. Another big battle. 7th place, and a lot of hype around Williams because of their great qualifying ever with Albon and Logan Sargent, 6th, 5th place. But both drivers did not finish in the points. Neither did anyone from AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, and Haas. Bottas, he got caught up in the first lap mess. Haas, both of them fell out of the points. We saw Hulkenberg go out, Yuki Tsunoda go out with mechanical issues towards the end of the race. Joey, were you surprised that Williams did not get any points and Sargent dropping all the way down to 16th place?
I'm not surprised that Sargent didn't get any points. I had a feeling that he was going to be dropping just outside to 11th or 12th. I am surprised that Albon wasn't able to, do what he's done so often in the past, but that DRS zone was so strong. Williams is great on the straight, but if everyone's got DRS behind them and, we see this, the strip straight is so long and with so much going on there, he eventually lost a spot to Ocon. And once he'd lost that, he lost 2, 3, 4 back to back to back. It was really, attrition at that point. I guess if we're looking at Abu Dhabi, AlphaTauri would need to outscore Williams by 8 points. And seeing as they only have 21 throughout the season, I think that is a big ask. So I think Williams is secure in 7th place, but I think they would have thought that they were going to kind of cement it a little bit more here rather than going into Abu Dhabi with uncertainty.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I've made this point, on this show within the last few weeks as well. But, when the margins are that small at the bottom of the constructors, all it takes is a shock podium, and Haas could end up in P7 there. I don't think that that's going to happen, but it leaves the mathematical possibility there that it would. So Williams, to your point, Joey, I think are in a very good position. I think it's a very tall order for AlphaTauri to go out there and get a 6th place finish, and also hope that Albon doesn't pick up a couple of points for Williams there, and then you have your 7th place secured. It's not impossible for that to happen though either. I think that the margins are so tight at the bottom there that it would have been really great for Williams to be able to cement that a little bit more, like you were saying. And I can't say I'm surprised they didn't get any points, but I am very surprised and borderline shocked at just how far down the grid they ended up, because it's not like they ended up 11th and 12th and you can say, well, they gave it a good run and came up just short. I mean, to your point, Joey, I thought Logan Sargent had a problem for a couple of seconds because he was dropping so rapidly, position after position, and to only come home 16th when they showed so much speed in qualifying, and again, to do it in your home country for Sargent in particular, I think it has to be very disappointing for that team.
But it's not entirely because of necessarily their own driving all the way, I'll say, because both of the Williams drivers, Fernando Alonso, Zach Brown, all admitted that a problem universal with all the Mercedes powertrains. We don't have the same straight line speed the rest of these guys do. And I as much as I would want to see another set of points for Sargent or especially Albon, I'm unfortunately not. I'm disappointed, right? But I'm not super surprised because we know that these cars do not perform great in dirty air when running behind other cars. And you're looking in your mirrors, you've got Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz. I don't want to say it was a pass waiting to happen, but from a strategic standpoint and from how they were driving, they were not doing a lot to necessarily hold their own out there.
Yeah. We had a point when you had Sargent behind Albon, and he was kind of the cork in the bottle because he was able to stay within DRS of Albon and able to fight as the rear gunner backwards. And then once Albon lost Sargent, it was Ocon next. And then you're sitting there going, okay, if this was Hamilton or Alonso, maybe that pass is coming a little quicker. Ocon might not be as aggressive.
Yep.
Second Ocon got by, that's when it all came apart for Albon.
Yeah. Also, very, very was hoping that Haas could totally deliver. They were looking real fast in qualifying.
Yeah.
Obviously, Nico Hülkenberg just lost it on his own there in the last couple laps. But oh my gosh, Alpine, you guys better have partied hard last night, because I don't think anyone was expecting you guys to be running up in 5th and 4th. You kidding me?
Yeah, we're talking about the Mercedes not having the straight line speed, and Alpine have proven on paper that their engine does not make the power that everyone else's does, to the point where they were trying to appeal at a certain point to redo their engine or to, have some kind of intervention there. And Alpine was up in the top 5 with both cars for a little while there. And Ocon, where did Ocon actually finish? He finished 4th. That is a huge boost for that team, who say that their powertrain is not good on straights, on a track that feels like it was a lot of straights.
Yep. Joey, I do want to ask you, how nervous were you when you were watching Gasly and Ocon out there? Because they were getting close. Race engineers were saying, let's focus on lap times right now. Let's not get our elbows out. And
listen to me. I'm nervous every time they cut to Ocon, because anytime, like when he was on team with Perez, when he was on team with Alonso, when he was trying to unlap himself from Verstappen, Ocon has this ability to find other cars, and it's almost like there's a magnet with him. When it works, it's amazing wheel-to-wheel driving, and it's beautiful to see. But when it doesn't, it seems to be Ocon on the receiving end of those things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, just imagine the nightmare that could have been. You've got pretty much all of your new investors watching, from the Chiefs players to Ryan Reynolds being there. But crisis averted. They get a absolute, I don't want to say quite Cinderella story, but a fantastic showing of what the next couple of years could be.
Yeah.
I was so, when they were showing that pass being made, I was just on the edge of my seat thinking, oh boy, this is not going to go. It went great. So, and Ocon throughout that race, he had some spectacular passes where either one of them could have been disastrous, but that one with Gasly, and really Gasly could have been at the points, but we know Oscar Piastri did that late stop, got the much fresher tires, got around him, including the fastest lap at the end. After the race, the drivers, they were praising the way the race played out. Max Verstappen, he said he is, quote, excited to come back next year, considering the tune we were talking about him on Saturday. We saw a positive reaction from race drivers from other disciplines that were in attendance. We know there was special events all weekend, from the opening ceremony, after the race, massive firework display across Las Vegas. We also know there's some issues ongoing. We know there is a class action lawsuit that's going to be filed because of the free practice 1 mess. We'll report on the details of that on Grid Tonight this Wednesday as the detail comes out. But Ben, starting with you, overall, did the Las Vegas Grand Prix live up to the hype?
Here we go.
Or changes are needed?
Well, Jackson, you're going to have to watch the pre-race show, because I'm not going to get as fired up as I was yesterday. But sorry to disappoint. I will say this. I don't think it was possible for it to live up to the hype, because the amount that they were hyping it up, was setting themselves up for that being an impossibility. Just the amount of promotion and attention that this was getting, and people saying this is going to be a spectacle. This is going to be bigger than when the Super Bowl comes here in a couple of years. I'm sorry. I know we got a great race, especially given what we've been treated to most of this year. I still don't think it was ever going to live up to the impossible hype that people were making this out to be, particularly leading up to it this week. And then again, obviously what happened on Thursday night, especially for the fans that were in attendance, that are still dealing with that, to the point where they filed a class action lawsuit over the whole mess. I don't think we can just forget about that either. So great race. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it was a complete snooze fest, even though it did end up in another Max Verstappen win. The on-track product was absolutely sensational. There were A lot of overtakes all throughout the field, a legitimate battle for the win. I think it was a great race, and I think that it gives you a blueprint for the kind of conditions that you want ideally next year to hopefully produce something similar. That being said, you look at the entire weekend and what improvements or changes need to be made. The fan experience, that's something that cannot be ignored, and that's something that, to everybody's point on social media this weekend, say what you will about the leadership in NASCAR, about the leadership in IndyCar, maybe about the leadership in IMSA. The fan experience over there in terms of the access that you get and how the fans were treated, and again, say what you will about some leadership decisions, at least you can kind of see how the leaders in charge of those series are at least listening to fan feedback and considering it. Maybe not, to the point where they're letting the fans run the series, but you at least feel like you have a voice and you're being heard. There's no argument that can be made that those fans in Formula One on Thursday night have anything similar to that in the same stratosphere or galaxy as that in terms of their privileges and rights as Formula One fans, to be treated the way they were, kicked out of FP2 after waiting hours for it into the early hours of Friday morning, and then be told, oh, well, thank you for coming. Here's a $200 voucher for your troubles, without apologize or regret being two of the 600 some odd words in that statement there that Formula One released. That obviously needs to be looked at. That cannot happen again, and that needs to be improved. You need to do a 180 on that in terms of your attitude and the fan experience before we come back in 2024. But as for the on-track product, certainly better than I was expecting. And I think it does, at least, again, to my point yesterday, for the fans that don't really care about practice, that are only going to watch the race, the casual race fans, if you want to go and use that term. I think that they come away with this experience, probably pleased with what they saw last night / this morning for the East Coast viewers that bothered to stay up. And I think, again, probably never going to live up to the hype that they gave it. But all things considered, I think it was probably the best case scenario in terms of the on-track product we could have seen.
I think for all the guys on Grid Network, for me, have seen the kind of love-hate relationship I've developed with this race, because as a SoCal kid, I was so excited in 2021 when I found out that this race was coming, that there was going to be an American race that wasn't going to be an absurd distance from me that I could go to. And then the prices were revealed, and it just felt like they were going so against the grain from what I've seen at Long Beach, how they were planning on treating the fans, how they were planning on running the event. And it just felt like all of that came to fruition Thursday night. And I am so waiting for the t-shirts to drop that say, I saw 9 minutes of F1 on Thursday night and all I got was this dumb t-shirt. And
it cost me more than $200.
It cost me more than $200 to be here. But and I absolutely hope that goes through. But watching comfortably from my home, there was for sure this mentality of make this race a barnstormer, and not all, but most of this will be forgiven. And dang it, they delivered. And dang it, seeing those cars almost go 3 wide down the strip, it's pretty cool. So I do think, to an extent, if you ignore the 48 hours before race day, yes, it was very cool. And I think it did actually, to an extent, live up to the hype. I do have one massive caveat here. And that is just how this race is being presented and how it should be ran through the future. I get you're launching something that's new, something that's very, very, again, kind of standing out from the rest of the Formula One races. I don't think it should have gotten this insane level of Vegas treatment. You do not need these Wednesday night introductions where drivers are saying, this feels like the Hunger Games. Why am I doing this? You don't need to have the Blue Man Group and Elvis impersonators running around the paddock. You don't need to have Bruce Buffer from the UFC screaming your name. And then there's Checo standing there like Tyler One at TwitchCon. Like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do next? You don't need these guys driving in a limo so they can go to a separate hotel just for the interviews and then going all the way back for the... Sorry, guys.
That back off on that
for the podium, for the most awkward car ride that's going to be memed so hard. What I'm getting at here is the racing on track was absolutely fantastic. Use that to sell this race. Don't use anything else. You have a fantastic sense of speed because of the lights, because of how close everything is. You have a great race setup with how these cars can overtake. This could be genuinely one of the biggest races, not just in North America, but in the world. Use the on-track action to sell it. Make it more accessible to fans. Make this the true American race, and I will totally be there with it every step of the way. And aside from the absolute train wreck that was Thursday night, this could still be something very, very special in the next couple of years. I am sorry for freaking the hell out. Joey, please calm me down.
No, I don't know if I'm going to be able to calm you down. I will say, just to play devil's advocate for a hot second here, the FP1 fiasco, yes, that was a bit of a train wreck. However, if we look at Spa 2021, the race that never was, when Russell got his first podium in a Williams because they did 9 minutes of racing behind a safety car after 4-hour rain delay. No one there got refunds either. They watched the same amount of racing, except that was a race, not a practice. And I understand that people, drove in, these tickets were expensive and all that. But if we can forgive Formula One for, doing that on a race, and I'm not quite actually saying that we have forgiven Formula One, but I think it's interesting how much people want to come after Las Vegas for this incident, whereas Spa, a beloved and historic track, having an incident that is kind of equally part of the environment, right? Rain versus a manhole cover that has never been driven over by a Formula One car. I almost call it weather, but it's weather from the ground. It's unforeseen circumstances. That's the point that I'm getting at. We're quicker to forgive a place like Spa than we are Vegas. And because of that, I think this did live up to the hype, because the hype wasn't that this was going to be a perfect race. When we reacted to a race happening in Las Vegas, none of us thought, perfect, that's exactly what we want. This is going to be the perfect race. I hope it delivers. We said, no, this is going to be a train wreck. And we got exactly what we wanted and more. We got the train wreck. We got to see the spectacle. We got to see all the problems and the niggles and the, putting F1 under the microscope of the fact that they, deal with these high dollar companies and it's all about the money. And on top of that, we got a good race. That's the best of both worlds, as far as I'm concerned.
No, it's great to see it recover. It's hard for me to compare it to Spa because, one, Spa as a track can't just be like, you get the hell out of here, Rain. There was so much that was avoidable for this. Kim Illman, F1 photographer, was literally saying, these manhole covers are usually locked down or welded in or something. I don't know why they aren't yet. We're going to have to see if they, fly out. And it's more of just a lack of preparation. Could Spa have done bigger, try and had bigger drain covers or had some way of getting that water out a bit better? Yes, sure. But again, I just feel like that was from a lack of preparation for the F1 race, for the Vegas race, at least.
Yeah, I mean, well, for Spa, that was the lack of preparation, was that we hadn't raced in Spa at that time of year when they have those rains before. True. So it is an F1 Liberty Media lack of preparation on both ends. One is a little more avoidable than the other. You're right. Yeah. I don't think it's going to sour the world on Las Vegas when it comes to the third or fourth time that we're here.
And one of the things, they're not having to repave the strip next year. So we know for all the local Las Vegas, that's not an issue. A lot of construction this year, especially the paddock, they don't have to do next year. I find it interesting with Spa, though, too. Of course, that's a promoter here. F1, they were putting on the event. So I bet they're learning for next year how to make it better. And with Spa, as much as we all love Spa because of the history, the challenges of the track compared to Vegas, relatively flat, the long straightaways, when it comes down to it, we know, as Lewis Hamilton has said, cash is king. Spa, always on the rumor mill of it's going to be dropped next year. They're not bringing in the revenue. Whereas Vegas, if the demand is there next year as the same as this year, that race is going to be there a long time. I think the other thing I'm curious too, Baku used to be that wild card race. Some folks call it the Talladega of F1. I'm really curious to see if F1 Las Vegas could continue to live up, because I feel the last 2 years in Baku, granted, Verstappen is just on another level. It seems that race has sort of been a little bit more predictable compared to the last few years where it was just mayhem on the streets of Baku. So Vegas, very interesting. Also interesting from SHT. Lance Stroll out of nowhere, 19th to 5th. Both Ocon Stroll started from the back of the grid, 16th and 9th, to finish in the top 5. They were definitely making up grounds, especially with that first lap crash and all the passes.
Comment also here, Joe, from Humperdink Fang Boner. Sorry, I just really wanted to say that. Watching it on TV seemed like all the lighting and stuff on the side of the track completely obscured the view of Las Vegas. Seems pointless to have the race right on the strip if you can't see it. Race itself was great, though.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a consideration. You know, there's a certain amount of safety that has to happen. You know, you saw how small that strip got. If you've ever driven down the Las Vegas Strip, it's like 4 lanes wide both directions. And then when you add all the safety and the lighting and the access roads and things like that, they basically had 3 lanes to race on. It closed down a lot. And so a lot of that is what's obscuring the view, you know, like that point mentioned.
Yeah, the view, I bet you they're going to be working on a lot for next year, but this race, I felt, is definitely losing something for everyone to talk about, both for the positives and also for the not so positive with Free Practice 1. It's a tough act to follow for Abu Dhabi next race weekend. Of course, that'll end the season. Ben, next weekend we also have MotoGP and their season finale, and it looks like the championship, well, it's undecided still.
That's right, Joe. We'll talk about MotoGP now. Yesterday, we discussed how Jorge Martin won the sprint race. Pecco Bagnaia took 5th. Only 7 points was the difference between the two entering the race today. However, Martin's poor start and rough race saw him finish in 10th. Bagnaia, meanwhile, led him in closing stages and would have had a 26-point lead if he had held on to the win. However, he came home in second to Fabio Di Giannantonio, so it's only a 21-point lead over there. Bagnaia nearly lost the race completely, trying to retake the lead, but ultimately brought it home in second place. So, Joe, let's talk about the championship and momentum now. Has the momentum shifted into Pecco's favor here as we enter the final race?
I do feel it has shifted. When we look at what happened in the sprint race, Jorge Martin, he got the lead, ran off with it, and then we saw Pecco Bagnaia, 5th place, just staying there. Today in the race, by the first corner, Pecco Bagnaia went out there, got the lead. This is the kind of Pecco Bagnaia performance that we've seen go out there and get the wins early in the season. I feel he has the confidence now, especially after this race win and having a 21-point lead, that he knows the pressure is not on him. The pressure is on Jorge Martin to go out there and deliver some big results, because at the end of the day, you could stay one position behind Martin and you could claim that championship at Valencia. Overall, I think this is really shaping up to be a very exciting season-ending race. But I do feel like if for some reason Pecco Bagnaia does not win the MotoGP championship, we're going to be talking about what did he do to cost himself a championship.
Well, let's talk about the race winner, Di Giannantonio, out of a job for next year. He's yet to hear word on where he's going. He was given a mapping 8 message in the closing lap. Now, Fabio claims that wasn't a team order, but a lap reminder. We saw team orders in the race. Arca went wide for Martin to gain a spot and defended Martin's position. Ducati's used similar mapping 8 messages and team order codes before. Thinking back to Jorge Lorenzo in 2017. Now, Fabio said after the race, this is a direct quote, "After Malaysia, something about my future happened, and it was not a good thing." So that tells you the situation that he's in, Joe. When you consider Fabio, or Ducati rather, supply Fabio's bikes, and he's yet to have a ride for 2024, can you really blame him even for ignoring this team order here?
I don't blame him. Realistically, I feel he shouldn't at all, even if the circumstances were a little bit different for some reason. If it was a non-Ducati bike contending against Pecco Bagnaia and they wanted him to slow down to ensure Pecco had that advantage, no, don't do that because at the end, you don't have a future in MotoGP lined up. There could have been easily something lined up that we know because Luca Marini is leaving for Honda. If he could be easily a contender for that VR46 Mooney seat. That doesn't seem to be the case. You don't know the Ducati bike will be the championship bike, whether it's the factory or the customer team. I say no. Just go out there, get the race win. Because at the end of the day, if somebody says, hey, you know what? We're going to pick you up because you went out there and you won a Qatar, and he has been having good results week after week lately, that makes a huge difference in your career path from being a MotoGP, going to World Superbikes versus more the production style, or somewhere else. MotoGP is the premier level for motorcycle racing. Just because the supplier of your bike wants you to allow the factory team rider to have a bigger points lead, but still not clinch the championship? No. You don't have a future lined up? No. Just absolutely no. This is racing. This is not helping your teammate. This is helping your factory, which, by the way, still gives you a 1-year-old bike. It's not like they're giving you the same equal equipment. Fabio did what he needed to do to get the win for his career, and with nothing on the line, that's the case. If they told him, hey, you might replace Enea Bastianini, that might be a little different, but at the end, I say no. It's just, this is hard racing. This is what the fans want.
And Joe, to be clear, to just make sure I got this right here, this was his maiden victory in MotoGP. Is that correct?
Okay,
So,
yes.
Yeah, I would say you certainly can't blame a driver who doesn't even know if he's going to be on the grid next year from taking the opportunity to win your first race in the series. I think team orders are almost always laughable, but in this circumstance especially, you can't really blame the guy. Now, shifting back to the championship, 37 points is the most a rider can earn during a MotoGP weekend if they win both the sprint and the Grand Prix. If Bagnaia gains 4 points on Martin, he will win the championship as he holds the tiebreaker, having won the most Grand Prix races. Now, Martin has swept the sprint and the Grand Prix 4 times this year. That is his easiest route to the championship, but in either circumstance, the math still favors Bagnaia. He can finish one position behind Martin and still win the championship regardless. Joe, I know you just said the championship momentum has shifted in Bagnaia's favor. Has it shifted to the point where the championship battle is completely over?
That's where we're going to find out in the initial practice sessions leading up to the first qualifying if it's over. If I see Pecco Bagnaia up ahead, 3-4 positions ahead of Jorge Martin, and Martin seems stressed out, I'm calling it'll be over. Martin has been really good. He's been really fast, but after this race, especially when he had the horrible start, then he just overcooked the tires, started falling back to 10th place. He went to the garage area, and right away, they lowered the garage door. He did not want to be seen on camera. This seems to be a repeat pattern of when we see a driver miss out on such a huge moment. They have to put in a lot of effort to clear their mind, put it all behind him, and come to the next race, the championship race, and contend for the championship. And for Jorge Martin, too, we got to remember, while Pecco Bagnaia was doing this last year with Fabio Quartararo, all the media attention, they have a special intro, even the hashtag as well, too, with Pecco versus Martin. We're seeing that this is just going to be something, I think, of a big pressure cooker for Jorge Martin. I don't know if he's going to be able to overcome it. And even if he does get the pole, looks fast in the sprint race, he could win the sprint race. He's going to gain points on Pecco Bagnaia. But Pecco Bagnaia, all he has to do is just ride around on his essentially back tires, follow him around the track. The championship is his then. Really, I don't see Pecco Bagnaia making the mistake like he nearly did in this race where he was trying to get around Di Gianantonio and nearly crashed out. That would have been huge. I think he's got it in his mindset now. I could take it easy. It's far from over, but overall, I feel if Jorge Martin is not looking strong and you see Pecco ahead, then I'll say it's over.
All right, we'll leave it there. Sorry about that. I had an alarm set to remind me my editor-in-chief at Last Car, Brock Beard, has a live stream going on tonight, and that'll start in a few minutes. So if you want more discussion on the F1 race, actually, once we're done with this stream, you can head over to his channel for that. In the meantime, we'll wrap up the MotoGP segment here. Congratulations again to Fabio to Gian Antonio, and certainly, like you were mentioning, Joe, a great championship battle for us to keep our eyes on heading into next weekend. And again, we, of course, will wrap that up on Grid Live Wrap-Up next weekend as we look at the championship situation there still to be decided. Great battle over there and a great battle WRC as well. And we'll bring Joey and Jackson back in to discuss that one.
Yeah. All right. So WRC, Elfyn Evans led Toyota to a 1-2-3 at Rally Japan. Esa-Pekka Lappi, the top finishing Hyundai, was in fourth place, stopping that Toyota 1-2-3-4 that they could have had at home. And it is announced that Esa-Pekka Lappi is not going to be a full-time driver in 2024. Now, does this come as a surprise? Or was this bound to happen with Oitanek driving for Hyundai next year? Jackson, I want to start with you with that.
It kind of feels like it was bound to happen. I mean, Lappi has not had the season he's wanted. He was really hoping for this to be the first year where he really is starting to get consistent wins, only one win on his career. And while we saw him on the podium a couple of times, it's really hard to compare that to the season that, say, his teammate Darry Neuville's had with 2 wins this season, or even with Oitanek, who's gotten that Ford Puma, which has been known to be easily the slowest car on the grid, and managed to get wins out of that. So as much as it sucks for Lappi, it did kind of feel like it was bound to happen. Joe?
Yeah, it felt like it was just bound to happen, especially some of the mistakes on the big crashes he had where that took him completely out of contention. Overall, you're getting a really good...
Is that your alarm for someone else's podcast?
I think that was the alarm, actually. So hoping that everything's all right. But yeah, as I was saying, one of the big things is we got to see where with Esa-Pekka Lappi, the mistakes he had made this year didn't exactly get the wins, and then with Oitanek joining the team, I just felt like this was just bound to happen. Tough break for him, of course. WRC though, very competitive for Hyundai. A very disappointing year. But we know it's just one of those deals where, as you'll mention later on, it's been a tough year, not just on the track, but off the track for Hyundai.
Yeah, Lappi with 4 retirements this year. Definitely, like you said, Jackson, not the season that he was expecting. Hyundai's only wins came from Thierry Neuville. Their season, honestly, overshadowed by the passing of Craig Breen. Oitanek, the only Ford M Sport driver to win. Toyota won all but 4 rally weekends with 3 different drivers. Ogier won 3 during a part-time season. So when we're talking about dominance, like we're seeing in F1 with Red Bull and Alex Palou, is that a staple of this year? Is that we're just seeing dominance left and right? And where does the Toyota Gazoo dominance of WRC fall? As all-time WRC dominance, where does it fall in terms of this year? Joe, I'll start with you with that.
Overall, I feel the dominance of this year, Toyota, they were just looking really strong. Some of the races they didn't win, a little bit of bad luck here and there. I think they could have easily potentially have pulled off a perfect season the way they were running. Darry Neuville, he was fast, but I just felt a little too many mistakes at key races, including here in Japan. Got caught up with a tree. That's not what you need to do. And when it comes to across the series, I know World Rally Championship, it's really one of those championships. If you're really invested in it, it's easier to follow since it's multiple days. Right now, there's no U.S. carrier on any television. It's just streaming, plus no American event or racers. A little hard to follow, but I feel this will probably be probably the second most dominant team we saw besides Red Bull in Formula One. What Ganassi and Alex Palou did, that was impressive, but Toyota Gazoo, they're looking impressive, not just for this year. Next year, they're easily going to be the team to beat. Past years, they've always been good, but this is, I think, they're top of their game right now. And I think...
yeah, Jackson, we're not hearing you. You muted?
We're good. I am so scuffed. Y'all have no idea.
Yeah, no worries.
8 wins on the season. Worst finish of 4th. Everything else was on the podium for them this year. it's hard for me to call it a direct set of dominance when their kind of strategy to doing that is just running more cars than everyone else. And you also take into consideration just how narrow of a competition it is, only going up against Ford and Hyundai this year. But I think it's still absolutely something that we need to acknowledge, because even in the world of rallying, this is a level of dominance that we have not seen in a very, very long time. I think it's absolutely a 1-2 punch with Rovanpera and Eflin Evans. And while it definitely is not necessarily a Red Bull or Pilot, I think it's absolutely one of the most dominant seasons that we're going to be talking about for a while here in the WRC, Joey.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that there are only, there's 3 manufacturers in the sport. So dominance is relative. When it comes to, F1, you're looking at 10. It does mean something that this is also, 3 years on the trot for them, ever since, that the Gazoo Racing name became Toyota's racing brand. They've been pretty strong here and in WEC as well. So it is a different kind of thing, because it feels like it is overarching in that way. But it gives me hope for next year. And, maybe like you were saying, Joe, we will get a US carrier, because if you are not already watching WRC, if you tuned into this stream because you are excited about the Las Vegas Grand Prix and you were excited about that because of spectacle, WRC is a great place to find some spectacle. So, the more people we can get watching WRC, the more likely we are to get a US carrier.
Absolutely.
The season for 2024 starts January 25th with the Monte Carlo Rally. And everybody, don't forget that next weekend is the final weekend for the grid ranking. Joe, tell us more about the grid ranking.
Definitely. And one thing I want to also add to it was Jackson's point about the lack of competition. I started thinking about, okay, when we saw Sebastian Loeb and Citroën dominate World Rally Championship, you have a much more diverse fields. You still have Subarus. If we could see Subaru potentially come back in,
We've heard rumors.
The rumors are swirling. So.
Subaru hasn't even come back to the streets yet. They don't have an STI. So let's see when they come back to WRC.
That will be something else. And before, also with the grid ranking, Adam said Jackson enjoyed the content from Velocity Invitational at Sonoma.
Adam, thank you so much, man. That was an absolute fantastic event. If I can get the soapbox, huge thanks to Jeff O'Neill and Con Media for letting me go out and cover that. Absolutely a fantastic event. Hopefully I'm back next year. For everyone who's on Outlap, stay tuned. We've got so much stuff in the next couple of weeks talking about that. So, yeah.
And in the video description, we do have links to Jackson, Joey, and Ben channels, so you could check them out over in their channels. Grid ranking, week 34. Well, of course, Max Verstappen continue to lead, and he will set the record for the largest margin of victory, because even if he was to finish dead last at the next race, his score will drop, but it's not going to drop to the point where it's going to get anywhere close to Alex Palou. Jorge Martin fell a couple of positions. He could still finish in the top 10 if for some reason he has a horrible race weekend. So the top 10 is pretty much all set. First time we're going to have 2 Formula E drivers finish here. And of course, Alex Palou, the highest finishing IndyCar driver in the grid ranking. Next weekend, of course, is the final race weekend, taking a look at the full grid ranking for week 34. Formula 1 at Abu Dhabi, MotoGP at Valencia. We're also going to be seeing who takes that championship, and the Repco Supercar Series season finale race. So they got 2 races, so 4 in total. Also, a separate reminder for everyone with Pick a Winner. We got a very interesting 3-way battle next race weekend. Kobe from the Grid Network, Alex from Twitter, and Matthew Bro from Grid Network are the 3 remaining left for Pick a Winner. So be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network so you don't miss any of our coverage here. Before we go off the air, it's time for the shining moment. We encourage everyone in the chat room to share what your shining moment was from the race weekend. Jackson, starting with you, what's your Grid one shining moment?
I still cannot hear you, Jackson.
I will one day learn how to get this working. I swear. We were talking at the end of the Japanese Grand Prix about how well Oscar Piastri Oscar Piastri can do on new circuits. And if he can podium at Suzuka first time by, how well can he do when everyone's going to a track for the first time? And despite circumstances, I think driver of the day absolutely should have gone to Oscar Piastri yesterday. Obviously victim to some circumstances, but was still running in that podium position a majority of the race in what was considered by a lot of people to be an underperforming McLaren for that event. So absolutely my shining moment, letting it stick out for Oscar Piastri and McLaren.
Forgive me for taking the easy and obvious one, but my shining moment has to be the last lap pass for Charles Leclerc on Checo Perez to take P2. That is my one shining moment. That, I think, is the highlight of the season, to be quite honest. And you can only imagine if that had actually been for the win, the kind of reaction that would have gotten. But, of course, Max Verstappen is inevitable, 16 of the last 17 and counting. We'll see if he can pass Sebastian Vettel for third on the all-time wins list next weekend at Abu Dhabi.
No, Ben, I was going to take it if you didn't. But my shining moment, because, I have a history in broadcast of motorsport. And one of the things that I knew was going to be a problem with Las Vegas, whether the racing was good or not, was the logistics. We mentioned it a little bit, that trip all the way over to the Bellagio just to do the interviews and then having to go all the way back for the podiums. My shining moment is the one guy who awkwardly and out of focus walked in front of Verstappen's interview. That is your 15 seconds of fame, sir. I can just hear in my head the director screaming
his ears off.
Whoever that was, because they were trying to deal with sync issues. They were not, people weren't standing in front of the right camera, so they were already dealing with stuff. And some guy down there just walks in front of the camera, looks at it, and goes, "Oh," and gets out of the way. Congrats to you, sir. Shining moment of the season.
As a one of those shining moments, a lot of people are not going to forget because it's just the internet. I'll never forget Adam, his shining moment. Qatar, incredible sprint and Grand Prix. For me, my shining moment is from Qatar. Fabio Di Giannantonio getting that win. He has no ride lined up. A lot of folks felt like he's just going to be out, maybe World Superbike, the production level racing. But he really been showing a lot lately, and to be told of something bad about your future in the prior race and then to come out, fighting, and getting the win, that is huge for that Gresini racing team. Now they've had both riders take wins, something that is not very much said because we're seeing a lot of domination over in MotoGP with Pecco and Jorge Martin, essentially Ducati just taking everything except Alex Rins on the Honda getting a win. And Lacius Espargaro too. What an effort, what a race weekend for them. And of course, we encourage everyone tuning in. Be sure to invest in us in the Grid Network right here through our Patreon. Join these fine folks, Colin DeShell, Mark, Ron, David, and Matthew. Your name will be highlighted. You'll get some Grid Network stickers. And you can also do a Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. If you're not watching us live, hit the thanks button. And still, if you want to give some coffee money to somebody on the Grid Network team, you could do that. Just put their name and they'll thank you on the air and we'll forward the funds to them. For Ben, Jackson, and Joey, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.